Ooh. It's 4 o'clock. Everybody here?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Wait, is my. Oh, well, there you go. Zoom is not working for me. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, hello, everybody. I'm going to pause the recording just real quick. So, like I talked about last week, all public speaking is done for a purpose, right? In this class, we're going to cover 3 of the main general purposes of public speaking. We're going to cover how to speak to inform an audience, how to teach them to do something. We're going to cover how to give a speech to persuade somebody, to get them to do or believe something. And for this speech, we're going to cover the most basic purpose of public speaking, which is to introduce yourself. Now, introducing yourself is a little bit more complicated than it might sound, because the reality is that we live very complicated lives. For a minimum, it took all of us at least 18 years just to get to this point. If we sat down and we tried to tell the entire story of who we are to somebody, then we would never have enough time in the day. So with a speech of introduction, what you have to do is you have to select what you believe are the most important aspects of yourself, organize them into a single cohesive speech, and then present it to an audience in a way that's not only informative about yourself, but also engaging and also delivers a singular point. So, in this speech of introduction, what you will be doing is you will be selecting 2 objects, any 2 objects that you own, and you will be using them to introduce yourself to the class. So, an example would be if you just look around your room and you just pick 2 different objects and you say, this is my hydro flask and this is my non-metal hydro flask. One I use for running, the other I just keep them on my room while I'm working. Now, those 2 objects represent 2 distinct aspects about myself: exercise and my job as a teacher. By talking about both, I present 2 very important aspects of myself to an audience, using those objects as a metaphor to get my speech started. So, we're going to go ahead and we're going to shift over to the speech of introduction handout that you can find on Canvas. So, again, similar to this activity we delivered on Friday, this is a speech where we're just kind of introducing ourselves. We just want to get the audience to know who we are. And beyond just a surface level, hi, my name is this and my major is this, we want to go a little bit more in depth. We want to try to reveal something that's actually insightful about who we are as people. Because while I don't have 18 years or 26 years in my case to tell you every single detail about myself, I can, in 3 minutes, try to condense 2 critical aspects that I want you to know about me. So, this will be a 3-minute speech worth 50 points, where you will also write a speech outline worth 25 points. Now, on Wednesday, I'm going to talk more about the actual process of writing that speech outline, but basically this speech is going to consist of an introduction where you lay out everything you're about to talk about. So you tell us, okay, you tell us what are your 2 objects, what connects those 2 objects, and a little bit about what the entirety of your speech is actually going to be about. And then you have 2 main points, each about 1 object. There you want to go a little bit more in depth, not necessarily about the object, but about what the object represents. So you can talk about the object, but you can also tell us how you found the object or how you came into possession of the object. You can tell us a story related to the object. You can tell us a story related to whatever area of your life the object comes from, and so on. So, right here, you can see a pretty big dent on this hydro flask right here. Well, this comes from a time where I was running and I had the hydro flask in one hand and I was running to my car and it flew out of my hand, spiraled over, and smashed in the windshield of another person's car. Now, that wasn't a very pleasant experience, and now I no longer take this on outdoor runs, because I basically now see my hydro flask as a lethal weapon. So now I always have that dent to remind me of just how embarrassing an experience that was when I shattered someone's windshield. It was a very awkward conversation, to be sure. That's just one story. And the key is that stories are what make your speeches interesting, because only you have those interesting stories to tell. You have those unique experiences that the audience can't get from anywhere else. So, basic format, we can see on basic format, we have our introduction, our main points, a transition between main points, and a conclusion. The specific elements of each part of your speech, we'll go into more detail probably on Wednesday. But for now, just for thinking about some, not necessarily objects that are important to you, because I find that a lot of people for this speech choose something like their grandmother's prized diamond ring or something. But instead, try to think about what's important to you in terms of the things you do, the organizations you're a part of, the activities you're passionate about, and so on. And then try to see, okay, can I find an object to represent that? So it's less about finding the most important thing you own and more about identifying the most important aspects about yourself. Rodrigo?
Yeah, can I share a thought real quick?
Go ahead.
I kind of made a connection between two objects that I can use for my speech. Can I share with you guys?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I can either use the book for this class and the book that I use for trainings at work, which basically will mean to me as a main idea as how I'm trying to become a better instructor at work by educating myself in a communications class.
That's an excellent way to frame your speech. I really like how you phrased it, right? You're learning how to teach. It's a great way to put it. And and I like that you're finding that connection, because that brings me to my next element. So the problem with this speech is that it can very easily turn into middle school show and tell, right? I mean, so many times I had high schoolers come up and just go, this is my volleyball and this is my volleyball trophy. My volleyball represents how I love playing volleyball, and my volleyball trophy represents how much I love playing volleyball and winning in volleyball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing is that this is a college level class. In a speech of introduction, you want to go to a deeper level around yourself. I'm not necessarily speaking to you directly, Rodrigo, so don't worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
But
all right,
what I'm saying is that you have to find a common theme between your two objects. So that means that a common theme is any kind of general idea that we all relate to, but we all relate to in different ways. So a theme connects the entirety of your speech. It allows you to communicate an idea that everyone can relate to in some way, but by you showing how you relate to in your specific way, now the audience is able to learn something interesting, unique, and insightful about you in particular. So I'm going to go ahead with the most common theme that you can use, which is family. An example of how family is a good theme is that everyone understands or relates to family in some way. Everyone understands that family has certain commonalities, right? All families have this thing in common, that they are all something to relate to. Everyone has a family in some sense. It could be a family that's related to you. It could be a family that you found. It could be a family of friends, and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, by now framing the entirety of my speech around family and finding two objects that represent two distinct aspects of my family, now everyone can understand what I'm talking about. They can all relate to family. They can all think back to their relationship with their family. And then I can tell specific stories about my family. I can tell you about how I specifically relate to my family, how I spend time with my sister, how I spend time with my brother, how I spend time with my parents, and so on. That's something only I can say in my speech. But it's interesting because depending on how I frame it, depending on the stories I tell, the audience isn't going to hear it anywhere else. It's completely new. What you want to avoid is that you want to avoid just talking about the theme itself and referring to it in the abstract. You want to avoid just saying, I love my family so much. My family is so special to me. I don't know what I would do with without my family. You can say that, but the thing is that most people can say that. It doesn't really tell us anything about you. It doesn't really tell us anything about your specific relationships with your family. So rather than say, I love my family so much, give us a story of what a day in your household looks like, and so on. Now, to my long-winded point back to Rodrigo, I like how he's already has a really strong theme. He can have a lot of strong themes. He can have a theme of self-improvement. He can have a theme of dedication. He can have a theme of education, and so on, right? All those themes would work for his speech. The important thing is that now he's able to connect everything together, so it doesn't just sound like one speech about the first object and another speech about the second object. You want to wrap everything up as a cohesive whole. Does that make sense to everybody? I just threw a lot of information at you. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. We're going to move on then. We're going to move to the actual format of your speech. But, one second. So, here is the format of both the speech and the speech outline. Now, as you see, there are just some very basic elements. What we have is we have an attention gainer, where in the very first line of our speech, we want to hook the audience. We want to get them listening as quickly as possible. Today, chapter 6 is going to specifically center around how to gain the audience's attention. Then we have a thesis statement. The thesis statement is essentially, what is this speech about? What is this speech about, and the ultimate point of the speech, in just a sentence or two. So that's why I really want to stress that your speech needs to have a theme, something connecting your two objects, because that's what your thesis statement is about. Your thesis statement is answering the question, what is the theme of your speech? Okay? Not so directly as just saying the theme of my speech will be family today, but remember, you're trying to make a specific point about yourself. So rather than saying the theme of my speech is family, try to say something that only really applies to you. What does family mean to you specifically if you're using the theme of family? If, in Rodrigo's case, he's using the examples of his communication textbook and his trainer's workbook, or I think that was your second object, right? Pretty sure, but I might be wrong there. But
yeah,
no worries. But
I'm sorry, Professor. I was
no
trying to
worries.
say something. Yeah.
No worries. But did I get that right on the second object?
Yeah, it's because I've been an instructor for the longest time. I chose this class because I wanted to, become a better speaker and just to give them a better experience as an instructor. That's all.
So if it's all right, Rodrigo, I mean, I can come up with a pretty good thesis statement just for your outline right there. I could say something, you could say something like, I'm always looking to improve in whatever way I can, whether it's as a trainer or as a public speaker. And sometimes I found that one way that improving as a public speaker helps me as a trainer. And that right there is a good thesis statement. That right there,
exactly.
Very accurately summarizes everything you're going to talk about in your speech of introduction, where you can't get to know everything about you, but we can get to know the important work you've been working towards, for however many months or years, right?
Right.
And then for your main points, for your preview and main points, you're just telling us, okay, what are your two actual objects? For this speech, I've brought this and I've brought this. I've brought this object, which represents my whatever, and I brought this object, which represents my whatever, right? That just gives the audience a good idea of what the speech is going to be about. You want to preview your main points for the audience because it's very unlikely that they'll be able to, well, not very unlikely, but basically you always want the audience to be actively listening. You always want the audience to be engaged on what you're saying, and you don't really want them
over there
to be. I'm just gonna put you on mute real quick, Rodrigo. But and you don't really want the audience to be stumbling over, going, okay, wait, we're on this main point now. What's this about? Okay, yeah. By giving the audience a good idea, then they can more easily follow along. They now have nothing really coming as a surprise to them, and they're able to actively listen to you in the moment. That's why I try to give you a preview of each Zoom session before we get started, so you know, so you have a general idea of where I'm moving to next, and nothing really comes as a shock, at least ideally. And then for each main point, you're just going to be telling us a little bit more about what each object represents. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically about the object. It can be about whatever area of your life your object is supposed to connect to. What you want to focus your main points on are those specific stories. Tell us those specific stories. Use specific examples of a specific time when you were there. Who else was there? What were you doing? Where were you both? And so on. By framing it that way, then you're always able to keep the audience engaged with that unique content. Telling a story is always more interesting than just being vague and saying, my family means so much to me. Now, I have no doubt that your family can mean a lot to you, but you want to go more in depth, because if you just keep things surface level, if you keep things vague, then the audience has nothing to really connect to. And then for your conclusion, what you're doing is you're just summarizing everything you just talked about. Now, this one's a little bit of a shorter speech, 3 minutes long, but for longer speeches especially, you want to summarize everything so that you're absolutely sure that when you're done speaking, the audience knows everything you just talked about. That they don't have to try to recall any information you said, because odds are they're not going to want to wind back to the beginning of your video to hear it over. By summarizing everything, now you're sure that the audience, after listening to your speech, knows exactly what it was about, what your theme was, and what your main objects were. Okay? So, that's just the general format of both your speech of introduction and your speech of introduction outline. Like I've said a couple of times already, I'm going to go more in depth onto your outline on Wednesday. So, no one has any questions. I'm going to go ahead and get started with chapter 6 of the textbook. But are there any questions so far on the speech of introduction? Okay, so let's get started then. Now, so chapter 6. Now, you're probably wondering why we skipped from chapter 6 all the way to, you're probably wondering why we skipped from chapter 6.
I think you're. I don't hear anything, Professor.
Can you all hear me okay? Am I coming through? Or did I?
I can hear you, Professor.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Rodrigo, you might want to check your speakers, but yeah, it looks like I'm coming through fine for everyone else. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Rodrigo, can you hear me? I feel like that's a redundant question. Okay, well, I'm gonna keep going, but Rodrigo, if you're hearing me, if you're seeing my lips move, but you're not hearing me, just go ahead and type something into the, I don't know why I'm saying this. Okay, so, moving on. So, we skipped from chapter 2 to chapter 6 because I found that the first step before we even get started writing a speech outline to prepare for delivering a speech is we want to answer that question, okay, how do I actually get my audience listening? How do I get my audience's attention? It's a question every teacher has had to ask themselves every single day that they've walked into a classroom or a proverbial Zoom session since the dawn of teaching, I guess. Because one of the hardest things a public speaker has to do is they have to immediately wake the audience up and focus in on their speech specifically. We live in a very distracted age. We live in an age where at any moment you can get a message on your phone, a notification in your browser, you can instantly just open a new tab and watch a YouTube video, right? It's very difficult for the audience to focus on one thing in particular. That's what we really want to master in today's chapter, because what we want to do is we want to open our speeches in the most creative, engaging way possible from the very first line of our speech. We want to do this because you might have heard the phrase, you only ever get one first impression with somebody. Well, just like with that, in a public speech, you only really get one first opening hook. You only really get one chance to immediately engage the audience. And that's with the very first thing you say. Today, we're going to look into why we need to get the audience's attention, how to actually do it in terms of specific strategies, and things we might want to avoid. Because if we always begin our speech the same way, and if we begin our speech the same way as everybody else, it's going to be much more difficult for our speech to stand out amongst 31 other speeches. I noticed this because I was watching your activity submissions on Friday, and they all largely began the same way. Hi everyone, my name is this, and today I'll be talking about this. Now, that works perfectly well if we just want to give a brief introduction, but if we want to maintain the audience's attention, if we actually want them to sit down and listen to what we're saying, if we get up and if we just introduce ourselves when we've already given our speech, when we've already introduced ourselves to the class, when people can easily see our name in the Go React submission, then it doesn't really engage us. It doesn't really make our speech stand out. So I think today we're going to skip the discussion question, but I would just like to ask a little bit of an open-ended question that you're free to answer. So the question or questions is this: have you ever felt yourself losing attention as soon as someone began talking to you? As soon as someone began talking to you about something and your mind just instantly drifted to, crap, I have to do the laundry today. Has that ever happened to any of you?
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the conversation
Yeah.
about?
All the time, Professor. I can't remember last time.
All the time? Can anyone remember a specific time where you just let the words roll over you, where you can't even remember what was being said?
I think one time it was like I was trying to talk about this problem I had, and then the person I was talking to, like after I finished everything I was saying, they started talking about like them and how their experiences helped them through the problem I had. But I kind of like ignored it because it wasn't really applying to what I was going through. So I didn't like it didn't relate to me and stuff like that.
Very much so, right? Especially where it also indicates how as soon as someone made the conversation about them, it showed that they weren't really there to listen to you, right? And right there, okay, so time to check out. That happens so often as a teacher, you don't even know. Because every single time you go to another teacher about any kind, like asking for any kind of advice, they'll just say what they did in their specific class with that specific student, and 99 out of 100 times, it's not applicable to my class at all. So I'll just be like, yeah, I'm trying to keep the students engaged. What do I do? And then someone goes, oh, I just gave them some math problems to work on during the bell. I'm like, okay, so what? Do I give them some speeches? That kind of thing. So, yeah, of course. All right. What else? Any other examples where you just could not pay attention? Columns 103 lecture on chapter 6, perhaps?
My boss was yesterday trying to lecture me on how to swap shifts with a coworker, and the coworker was on the wrong, so I was like, I'm on the right, and on my head I'm thinking like, oh, what I'm gonna eat later. And he was talking like going through it, and I was like, I just can't pay attention, like I can't focus.
Oh, yeah. No, especially when you're in another place. Especially because, I don't know why, but for some reason, a boss can't really say something in 1 minute. They have to stretch it out to 10 minutes, and they just keep repeating the same point over and over again. And they just go, yeah, I know, you just can't keep doing that. Yeah, I know I won't do it. I know, you just can't keep doing it, because if you keep doing it, we're going to land in a lot of hot water there. Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'm just getting flashbacks to when I talked to my supervisor a couple weeks ago.
He's just there trying to like make you imagine like what kind of ways he's gonna use to punish you if you do something wrong. I was like, dude, like I get it. Like you already said it.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, okay, move on, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the question then would be, why were you losing focus? Daryl, Rodrigo, why were you losing focus during that conversation?
Because I wasn't interested in whatever he was saying.
Why do you think you weren't interested?
because it was something that wouldn't add anything to my,
Yeah.
to my experience,
Exactly, right? It wouldn't add anything to your experience. It wasn't teaching you anything. It wasn't convincing you to do anything useful, or it wasn't showing you that what you should do is useful. And it wasn't entertaining. Because if you can't answer one of those three or all three of those questions to your audience, then they have no reason to keep watching your speech. Because you want to keep that in mind in a speech of introduction where we're talking mainly about ourselves. We're talking mainly about ourselves and our unique perspective and all of that. That might feel very relevant to us, but we also need to make it relevant to the audience. We need to make it entertaining, informative, engaging for them. Otherwise, they're just going to sit back and they're just going to lose focus. Because if you don't answer that question, why should I care? Then their default answer is going to be, okay, I don't have to, or I don't have to care. So,
Right.
What is attention? Any thoughts? When I say pay attention, what am I asking you to pay? What am I trying to collect?
Focus.
What is focus?
Oh, professor. It's getting worse and worse.
Really engaging the students here, using all my teaching experience.
I'd say pay attention would be the ability to focus your mental. I don't know, professor. Just trying to make up.
Again, you're coming. You're close. You're close.
Is it like the ability to not be distracted by other like sources of other sources, and just to have like you as like my one goal, my one priority right now, I guess.
So basically, attention is having undivided attention.
Yeah.
But then what is attention?
Oh man. I'm gonna Google the word attention and give you a definition.
Let me beat you to it, Rodrigo.
Attention is the concept of paying truly knowledge of what are you saying, and make sure that you are connecting to the real meaning of what is the concept of that subject.
I really like that phrasing, Luke, connecting to the meaning of the subject. What you're talking about is demonstrating relevance. So it's not just someone sits there and doesn't tab out of your speech for 3 minutes at a time. It's someone listening and going, okay, here's what they want me to learn, and here's how I can apply it to my life. Here's the point of that speech. We'll talk more about listen, or did we already give a lecture on listening? We did not, but hearing is not necessarily the same as listening, and just focusing on a speech isn't necessarily paying full attention. Now,
Professor
Rodrigo,
can I read it to you?
Well, I'm about to read it right now, but
all right, it's all good. Go ahead.
But Daryl, Rodrigo, you were absolutely right. If we want to literally define attention, it is the act of focusing on a specific stimulus and avoiding other stimuli. At its most basic level, that's right. Attention, paying attention right now to this lecture is not tabbing out or not looking at something else while I'm talking. To all you YouTube watchers out there, paying attention is watching the entirety of this video in its full length. I don't really expect you to do that, but right. At a deeper level, attention isn't just focusing on this speech above all others, because all I need is just go full Clockwork Orange, shove a couple of toothpicks in your eyes, and then full attention, right? You literally don't have a choice. But if you actually want the audience to retain the information, to remember what you just talked about a couple days after they watched your speech, then attention is like Lou described, trying to connect beyond just the literal words being said, and trying to get at the substantive ideas beneath those words. Let me ask you another question. Are you a good multitasker?
Oh yeah.
You're college students. The answer, of course, is yeah, right?
Yeah.
I am.
How do you know you're a good multitasker?
Let me see.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Luke.
I can watch TV while I'm doing my homework, and at the same time If I'm doing laundry, because laundry, we don't use our hand, we put it in the laundry, in the washing machine. When it gets done, I can fold it at the same time and listening to you. So that means I can be a multitasker.
You can be a multitasker, but are you a good multitasker? I'm multitasking right now. I'm both talking to you and breathing. I'm both breathing and listening. I'm both listening and watching this screen. I'm both watching the screen and moving my hands. We're multitasking all the time, but what makes us a good multitasker?
I was really proud of my multitasking skills today. I was pushing an aircraft back from the gate. Okay, so I'm like driving this vehicle, pushing the aircraft backwards, and at the same time, I was talking to the captain on the radio, just like telling jokes and stuff, and talking to the guy that was training on the side. So I was doing all those three things. I was like, man, I can do a lot of stuff at the same time. It's so funny.
Right there, right? Is being a good is being better at multitasking meaning that you can do more things at the same time, or that you can do two things very well at the same time?
Two things very well at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. So
The
someone who can do 5 things at the same time isn't necessarily as good as someone who can do 2 things very well at the same time.
No.
No.
So by that definition, someone who can do someone who can do one thing very well, the absolute best, is the best kind of multitasker.
Wait,
Yeah.
say that again?
Well, if while we define good multitasking as being able to do fewer things very well at the same time versus being able to do more things at the same time, then the less things we do, but the better we do them, the better multitasker we are.
It's like that old saying, Professor, quality versus quantity, you know?
So by that definition, wouldn't it be better to try to focus on one specific thing to its best possible quality before we even approach quantity?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because the reality you'll find is that we all might think we're good multitaskers, but as this video demonstrates, it's not so easy. So, this is just a TED Talk on how easily we can be misdirected. No, what happened? Oh no. There we go.
Can't hear it.
We can hear it.
That's my bad. I forgot to share sound, and now it's on YouTube forever. Don't I just look like a master of technology right now? But here we go. Can you hear it? Thumbs up on your screen if you can hear this. If you can hear it. All right, there we go. Got it.
Do you think it's possible to control someone's attention? Even more than that, what about predicting human behavior? I think those are interesting ideas if you could. I mean, for me, that'd be the perfect superpower. Actually, kind of an evil way of approaching it. But for myself, in the past, I've spent the last 20 years studying human behavior from a rather unorthodox way, picking pockets. When we think of misdirection, we think of something as looking off to the side, when actually it's often the things that are right in front of us that are the hardest things to see, the things that you look at every day that you're blinded to. For example, how many of you still have your cell phones on you right now? Great. Double check, make sure you still have them on you. I was doing some shopping beforehand. Now, you've looked at them probably a few times today, but I'm going to ask you a question about them. Without looking at your cell phone directly yet, can you remember the icon in the bottom right corner? Bring them out, check, and see how accurate you were. How'd you do? Show of hands, did we get it? Now that you're done looking at those, close them down, because every phone has something in common. No matter how you organize the icons, you still have a clock on the front. So, without looking at your phone, what time was it? You just looked at your clock, right? It's an interesting idea. Now I'll ask you to take that a step further with a game of trust. Close your eyes. I realize I'm asking you to do that while you just heard there's a pickpocket in the room, but close your eyes. Now, you've been watching me for about 30 seconds. With your eyes closed, what am I wearing? Make your best guess. What color is my shirt? What color is my tie? Now open your eyes. By show of hands, were you right? It's interesting, isn't it? Some of us are a little bit more perceptive than others. It seems that way. But I have a different theory about that model of attention. They have fancy models of attention, Posner's trendy model of attention. For me, I like to think of it very simple, like a surveillance system. It's kind of like you have all these fancy sensories, and inside your brain is a little security guard. For me, I like to call him Frank. So Frank is sitting at a desk. He's got all sorts of cool information in front of him, high-tech equipment. He's got cameras. He's got a little phone that he can pick up, listen to the ears, all these senses, all these perceptions. But attention is what steers your perceptions, is what controls your reality. It's the gateway to the mind. If you don't attend to something, you can't be aware of it. But ironically, you can attend to something without being aware of it. That's why there's the cocktail effect. When you're in a party, you're having conversations with someone, and yet you can recognize your name, and you didn't even realize you were listening to that. Now, for my job, I have to play with techniques to exploit this, to play with your attention as a limited resource. So if I could control how you spend your attention, if I could maybe steal your attention through a distraction. Now, instead of doing it like misdirection and throwing off to the side, instead what I choose to focus on is Frank. To be able to play with the Frank inside your head, your little security guard, and get you, instead of focusing on your external senses, just to go internal for a second. So if I ask you to access a memory, like, what is that? What just happened? Do you have a wallet? Do you have an American Express in your wallet? And when I do that, your Frank turns around. He accesses the file. He has to rewind the tape. And what's interesting is he can't rewind the tape at the same time that he's trying to process new data. Now, I mean, this sounds like a good theory, but I could talk for a long time and tell you lots of things, and they may be true, a portion of them. But I think it's better if I tried to show that to you here live. So, if I come down, I'm going to do a little bit of shopping. Just hold still where you are. Hello, how are you? It's lovely to see you. You did a wonderful job on stage. You have a lovely watch that doesn't come off very well. Do you have your ring as well? Good, just taking inventory. You're like a buffet. It's hard to tell where to start. There's so many great things. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Hi, sir, could you stand up for me, please? Just right where you are. Oh, you're married. You follow the directions well. That's nice to meet you, sir. You don't have a whole lot inside your pockets. Anything down by the pocket over here? Hopefully so. Have a seat. There you go. You're doing well. Hi, sir. How are you? Good to see you, sir. You have a ring, a watch. Do you have a wallet on you?
I don't.
Well, we'll find one for you. Come on up this way, Joe. Give Joe a round of applause. Come on up, Joe. Let's play a game. Pardon me. Don't think that you need this clicker anymore. You can have that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Come on up to the stage, Joe. Let's play a little game. Now, do you have anything in your front pockets? Money. All right, let's try that. Can you stand right over this way for me? Turn around and let's see. If I give you something that belongs to me, this is just something, a half poker chip. Hold out your hand for me. Watch it kind of close. Now, this is a task for you to focus on. Now, you have your money in your front pocket here?
Yep.
Good. I'm not going to actually put my hand in your pocket. I'm not ready for that kind of commitment. One time a guy had a hole in his pocket, and that was rather traumatizing. I was looking for his wallet, and he gave me his phone number. It was a big miscommunication. So let's do this simply. Squeeze your hand. Squeeze it tight. Do you feel the poker chip in your hand?
I do.
Would you be surprised if I could take it out of your hand? Say yes?
Very.
Good. Open your hand. Thank you very much. I'll cheat if you give me a chance. Make it harder for me. Just use your hand. Grab my wrist, but squeeze. Squeeze firm. Did you see it go?
No.
No, it's not here. Open your hand. See, while we're focused on the hand, it's sitting on your shoulder right now. Go ahead and take it off. Now, let's try that again. Hold your hand out flat. Open it up all the way. Put your hand up a little bit higher, but watch it close there, Joe. See, if I did it slowly, it'd be back on your shoulder. Joe, we're going to keep doing this till you catch it. You're going to get it eventually. I have faith in you. Squeeze firm. Squeeze. You're human. You're not slow. It's back on your shoulder. You're focused on your hand. That's why you were distracted. While you were watching this, I couldn't quite get your watch off. It was difficult.
Yeah.
Yet you had something inside your front pocket. Do you remember what it was?
Money?
Check your pocket. See if it's still there. Is it still there? Oh, that's where it was. Go ahead and put it away. We're just shopping. This trick's more about the timing, really. I'm going to try to push it inside your hand. Put your other hand on top for me, would you? It's amazingly obvious now, isn't it? It looks a lot like the watch I was wearing, doesn't it?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Oh, thanks. But it's only a start. Let's try it again a little bit differently. Hold your hands together. Put your other hand on top. Now, if you're watching this little token, this obviously has become a little target. It's like a red herring. If we watch this kind of close, it looks like it goes away. It's not back on your shoulder. It falls out of the air, lands right back in the hand. Did you see it go? It's funny. You got a little guy, he's union. He works up there all day. If I did slowly, if it goes straight away, it lands down by your pocket. I believe, is it in this pocket, sir? No, don't reach in your pocket. That's a different show. Sorry, that's rather strange. They have shots for that. And can I show them what that is? That's rather bizarre. Is this yours, sir? I have no idea how that works. We'll just send that over there. That's great. I need help with this one. Step over this way for me. Now, don't run away. You had something down by your pants pocket. I was checking mine. I couldn't find everything. But I noticed you had something here. Feel the outside of your pocket for a moment. Down here, I noticed this. Is this something of yours, sir? Is this... I had no idea. That's a shrimp.
Yeah, saving it for later.
You've entertained all these people in a wonderful way. Better than you know. So we'd love to give you this lovely watch as a gift. Hopefully it matches his taste. But also we have a couple of other things. A little bit of cash. And then we have a few other things. These all belong to you, along with a big round of applause from all your friends. Joe, thank you very much. So, same question I asked you before, but this time you don't have to close your eyes. What am I wearing? Attention is a powerful thing. Like I said, it shapes your reality. So I guess I'd like to pose that question to you. If you could control somebody's attention, what would you do with it? Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, as you saw, we might think we're great multitaskers, but the reality, and this is backed by so much research and so much science, is that we can't really pay attention to two things at the same time, or at the very least, pay an equal amount of attention to both. Because see how quickly he was able to misdirect his audience just by asking them to focus on some other specific detail. By just having them say, okay, what color is my shirt? He goes through his entire bit, and it wasn't until the very end that you realize, about 4 minutes in, that he changes his shirt, right? The audience attention is very easily misdirected, especially the more you divide that attention. So keep that in mind whenever you try to listen to two things at the same time, or whenever you try to do more than one thing at the same time. The reality is that the more things you try to pay attention to simultaneously, that the less attention you can give to each. This applies both to the audience, where if you're listening to a speech, you want to only be listening to that speech. If you're listening to a lecture, you only want to be listening to that lecture. And to the speaker, you want to keep in mind that the audience can very easily just tab out of your speeches, especially when we're using virtual speeches. You want to do everything in your power to keep them engaged, to focus all their attention on your speech specifically. So, we want to always be practicing what's called mindful listening. Mindful listening is active listening. It requires focus, as we kept talking about. Attention is focus. It means that we're not only listening to the specific words being said, that we're not just hearing a speaker, but that we're actually processing it. That we're trying to go, okay, why does the speaker want me to know this? How can I apply this to my life? What deeper message or meaning is there? How does this apply to the rest of your speech? By providing that mindful listening, you're going to get a lot more out of both the speeches you hear and the speeches you deliver. Because by listening, by really listening to a great speech, you can adapt all of that towards your own style of speaking. 1 second, let me just put this back in full screen. Just very annoying how if you play video, it decides. So, now that we've talked about why we need to engage the audience attention and what attention actually is, here are some specific strategies we can use to actually try to hook our audience. So, one way is you can use an unusual topic for your speech. These are all specific examples from my classes where on the left side you'll see a speech I've heard about 9,000 times before, and to the right a topic I've never heard before in a speech. So you could give a speech on Italian food. I've heard about 18,000 billion speeches on Italian food and Italian culture. I learned so much about Italian culture at this point. What I don't really know of is how to cook or serve soul food. I'm getting back into a cooking binge in quarantine. I really like to learn how to make some specific dishes, especially like gumbo or something like that. I've heard quite a few speeches on Japanese business mannerisms. I haven't actually heard that much on harajuku. So you can always do something a little bit newer. You can always frame things in a specific way. Keep that in mind when selecting a theme for your speech of introduction. Keep in mind that because I used the example of family when I was explaining a speech of introduction, almost every single person in this class is now going to use the theme of family. But you can use any theme. You can use any kind of general idea for your speech of introduction, whatever is most important to you. Just now in this Zoom call, again, Rodrigo, thank you so much for the amazing example. He gives great themes. He gives great themes of dedication, self-improvement, responsibility, and so on. All of those are things I haven't heard 1,000 times before. I've heard a theme, I've heard speeches on family related to the speech of introduction. I haven't heard so much on the specific hobbies you might be picking up or the specific interests and activities you might be picking up during this time of quarantine, and so on. So, keeping up with that novelty in the actual content of your speech, you can tell some unusual examples and unusual stories. Everyone has that one story. Everyone has that one story that they love telling at parties, that they love telling at family gatherings, that has everyone listening, that has everyone engaged. By telling those unusual examples, you always keep the audience listening. You make it more interesting to hear. Think about the last time you told a story to a friend. Did they want to listen when the story wasn't particularly interesting? Or did they want to listen when you had some juicy gossip for them, right? So, next we have unusual framing. Keeping up with that theme of the allure, keeping up with that theme of novelty. Unusual framing, by phrasing it in a different way, in a more creative way, now your speech sounds distinct. It sounds different from every single other speech given. Be creative with how you phrase certain things. Misdirect the audience, as we saw in the video. Make them think it's going to be one thing, but then have it revealed to be another. You can always provide twists. You can always garner some curiosity in who's listening to you, and so on. Always try to do something new. Always try to frame and reframe it in a way that you personally haven't really heard before. You can also use startling appeal. You can try to shake up your listeners out of their apathy. You can try to immediately hook them with an interesting quote, an interesting fact, an interesting statistic. The oh wow effect takes place when you're able to immediately demonstrate a startling comparison. So, I use this graph in particular because it represents the wealth distribution in the United States. It represents how, if each one of these bricks of money is $1 million, how much is owned by 1% and how little is owned by the remaining 99%. How you see how the majority of all the money in the United States is owned by only the very fewest on the far right of the graph. That immediately demonstrates in perfect visual clarity of the wealth disparity, of the wealth gap. Because now you can see just how quickly it ramps up and how much more money this income bracket has over just an income bracket a few steps down. You can also shake up your listeners just with specific things you do. Maybe a little bit of some gestures, some vocal variety, a tone of voice, things like that. I've had people do all kinds of outrageous things where, for example, last semester when I was teaching an SDSU class, I had someone who, for every one of his speeches, would dress up in a different outfit and use a different background on Zoom. So for one speech, he'd dress up as a baseball player with a Zoom background of a baseball field. For another speech, he'd dress up as Thanos from Avengers, and then have the Thanos world background. And for another, he'd dress up as a he'd dress up as a construction worker with a background of a construction yard. That always kept it engaging for the audience. That always got them laughing. That always had them tell a couple of jokes before his speech. He was able to immediately engage them because now he was able to use Zoom to his benefit. It's something they had never seen before. Back to that idea of novelty. And as Lou and many others in this Zoom call have talked about earlier, we also want our content to be meaningful to the audience. That means we want to have them in some way understand that this information is relevant to them. So one way we can do this for our speech of introduction, remember, with our theme, it's an idea that everyone can connect to. So we can have the audience reflect on the theme in their own unique way. We could ask them an open-ended question, kind of like I do during these lectures, just saying, family means this to me. What does it mean to you? Or when was the last time you felt like someone you weren't related to really was a part of your family? And so on, right? By asking the audience these questions, by potentially getting them to reflect a little bit, now they're really processing what you're talking about. Now you're having them actively engage with the content and not letting it just roll over them. So, another way, a very common way I've seen to keep the audience engaged is also through the use of humor. I try to use humor quite a bit in my lectures, as you might hear. It's not the easiest thing in the world. You could probably count the number of times I made you laugh on one hand. But with that humorous appeal, by getting the audience laughing, by laughing, it means they're listening. If they're laughing at our jokes, it means they're paying attention to what surrounds the jokes. I'm not here to teach a course on how to be funny. If I was able to teach that course, boy howdy, this would be a much different lecture. But some things to keep in mind are that you don't necessarily have to force humor. Not everyone is amazing at telling jokes. I'm not really great at it, not for lack of trying. You don't have to force humor. If you feel like you want to keep the discussion relatively serious, if you want to talk about something personal to you, then you don't have to force humor. That's all right. The audience will be much easier connected to something you're passionate about, rather than if you're trying to put on a fake mask up front. You also want to try to keep your humor and jokes particularly relevant and sensitive to a specific audience. So, for example, you might not want to joke too much about current events while we're still in them. It's kind of like a too soon effect. While we're still in the middle of a quarantine, you might want to be a little bit sensitive with the specific use of humor you might use, because we don't know how things are going to pan out in the next coming weeks or months, or even the past experience some people have had with those current events. And you also want to keep in mind that you don't want to offend anyone for two reasons. The first and most obvious is going to be ethical. You don't want to offend anyone because it's not ethically okay. Because by offending people, you create a less equal society for everyone. The second is that you want the audience to be listening to you. If you offend someone, they're not going to want to listen to you. Very rarely will someone do what I want to do or listen to what I have to say if I outright insult them. So it serves both a moral and a practical purpose. If you want one member of your audience that you can make fun of without any kind of consequences, it's going to be me. You can make fun of me however you want. I don't really care. Another person you can always make fun of without risking offending is you, telling jokes about yourself. By using what's called self-deprecating humor, you're able to get the audience laughing. You never have to risk offending them because you're making fun of yourself. How can you offend yourself? And you're able to appear more relatable to the audience. By being able to laugh at yourself, now the audience sees you as a little bit more of a common person as the every person. Rodrigo, you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I was gonna cite someone, but I don't know if I should.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say like okay, so those are things that to keep the listeners laughing. How does Donald Trump making sexist, racist jokes always get the attention of his his peers or whatever?
Because he's playing to that base.
Right.
The reality is that, but think of it this way, right? He's saying that offensive humor, and it appeals to people who usually aren't really the target of that, who really isn't the target of that humor. Does that make sense?
Right.
So when it's a joke that offends women, the men might laugh, but the women will be offended by it, and so on. Right? It might sound okay when you're surrounded by a group of people who aren't really offended by that use of humor, but that doesn't mean that it isn't offensive, and it usually means that you're just kind of surrounding yourself with people who aren't. You're isolating yourself from the people who are actually affected from the consequences of that humor.
Right. Yeah,
Again, don't hesitate to bring up a political or current events issue. I'm going to avoid getting overtly political, but again, it's not something I'll avoid or a topic to shun or anything like that.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of iffy if
And at the same time, almost every single book or rule written on public speaking, Donald Trump has broken at some point. So he's definitely rewriting the book for better or worse. Okay, so next is intensity. Now, another great way to keep the audience's attention is that you actually say something meaningful from the heart. These speeches of introduction are your opportunity where you can really begin to share a personal side of yourself that you might not necessarily be comfortable in a private conversation. That doesn't mean you have to share that personal insight about yourself. It doesn't mean you have to get vulnerable. But by doing so, you share to the audience a side of yourself that they can now see and share as a level of trust. It's like by demonstrating that, by getting a little bit emotional, by demonstrating something that was particularly heartfelt or deep or painful for yourself, by including the audience in that moment, they're far more likely to pay attention. Because this doesn't just sound like anything. This doesn't just sound like you just saying words. This now sounds like someone is taking the real time and effort, showing a vulnerable aspect of themselves, and I need to pay that respect. I need to reward that vulnerability with my full undivided attention. So, in your speech of introduction, don't be afraid to get personal in your stories. Don't be afraid to get a little bit emotional. I've had some people shed a couple of tears. I've cried a little bit while listening to some speeches of introduction. That's what this class is all about. It's about going beyond the surface and showing a real, genuine emotional side to our audience. That's both great for creating incredibly meaningful content and for getting the audience actively engaged into our speech. So, you can watch this video on your own time. It's just Chris Anderson kind of explaining the basic elements of public speaking. But that basically wraps up Chapter 6 of the class. So, Chapter 6 of the textbook. The worst part is when I upload this to YouTube and I hear every single time that I trip over my words or whatever. It's just like nails on a chalkboard to me. But that wraps up Chapter 6 and our Zoom meeting. Does anyone have any questions for me before we head out?
No, but going back to the video, he was a great speaker. I mean, he was using his hands, he was using humor, he was funny. I mean, I wish he could speak like that, and make my speeches sound like that.
That's exactly why we're here. Everything he's doing, we're going to cover probably by next week, and we have so many opportunities to practice it during our speech. That's kind of the misconception we have. We see someone who's a very good public speaker, and we think, I wish I could be like that. But the reality is that they got to that point by practicing so many speeches and speaking in front of so many audiences and just developing all the skills we're working on right now. So we'll get there. It's just a question of when, not if. Any other questions?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, that wraps up our Zoom meeting. Just as a reminder, I have my office hours tomorrow from 2 to 3 p.m. Feel free to stop by if you have any questions about your particular speech of introduction topic. We'll meet again on Wednesday when we cover chapters 7 and 8. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your Monday, and I'll see you soon. Have a great Monday, y'all.
You too, Professor. Thank